Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Real Fellas Talk Sports. I'm David Burnett, your host for tonight, joined by our regular panelists, Chuck, Larry, and Earl. Go. And Earl, you got to shut that phone off, my man. But that's all right. It wouldn't be the same without that ring. All right. Guys, have you guys been watching the World Series?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Big time.
I don't watch a lot of baseball until really it gets to the World Series, the playoffs. But it's been interesting. I think I've seen just about every inning, and last night was kind of painful because I'm cheering for Houston. Let me just start with you guys, and let me start with you, Chuck. Who's going to win this World Series right now? Keep in mind the Phillies are up 2-1, and they got 2 more games at home.
The Astros. The Astros are going to win.
Why?
So they still have to. Frank Framker, who pitched on Saturday. I forgot his last name. Valdez. They still got to get him on the mound. Verlander gets to go again. I don't think they're going to hit Verlander like they did the other day. So I think that with Verlander and Valdez on the mound, I just think that the Astros bats got to get going. Jordan hasn't been hitting yet. He's going to get going. So I don't know. I still like the Astros.
All right, Earl.
I'm going with Philly. I think the Phillies will win. I told you guys yesterday in the meeting the Philly is going to win it, and that's all. It's just their time. Obviously, on paper, the Astros look better on paper, but Philly's winning this series.
Larry.
I'm going with whoever wins the game tonight.
That makes sense. Whoever wins tonight, you know who has to win. Houston has to win tonight. You don't win tonight, it's over. 3-1, it's not going to work.
Remember, the format is 2-3-2. If they just steal one here, over the next in the 3 games, they still get to go back to Houston and play the last 2 games in Houston. So if it's today or the next day, as long as they win one of those 3.
Well, you bring up the 2-3-2 format. I hate that format. I think it's so unfair, particularly to the home team who's supposed to get 4 games. But if they don't win a game at the first part of it, they're in trouble because you got those middle 3 games for the other team that they can sweep you in and it can be over. Larry, let me start with you on that. Is this a fair format?
Absolutely. It's been that way for years. The NBA does it in their finals. Baseball, unlike other sports, I think the home field advantage matters less because it's not as much of an emotional sport. I mean, everybody gets a chance offensively. It's not like you can give LeBron the ball every time down court or Henry every time down. Every batter gets to take his turn at bat. And baseball just seems to work differently. No problem with it. You can't win a road game. You don't deserve to win it.
So, is it a fair format, Earl?
I don't like the format, but I don't see anything unfair about it. I don't like the format, but I don't see anything unfair about it. To answer your question, no.
All right, Chuck. Fair format or not?
I don't have a problem with the format either. To be honest with you, I don't know what the format used to be.
It's been this for years.
For years,
yes, World Series been this. Yeah, I'm talking about decades.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Well, I would still prefer to see a series of any kind: 2-2, 1-1, 1. That's what I would like to see.
Right.
But we're not going to see it. I know.
Right.
All right. Let me ask you. The big story about the World Series is not just the former cheating of a couple of years ago and Houston trying to change the paradigm about them, but it's about Dusty Baker. Dusty Baker has won more than 2,000 regular season games as a manager. He's been to 3 World Series, but he hasn't won. If Dusty Baker, who is the manager of the Houston Astros, does not win this year, and he was in the World Series last year with the Astros. If he doesn't win this year, is it going to taint his legacy? Let me start with you, Earl.
If he doesn't win this year, has he ever won a World Series? I can't even remember.
No.
I mean, yes. When you start talking about the greatest, the great ones, I mean, he's won a lot of games, but if he hasn't won the big one, yes. To answer your question, yes, it will taint his legacy if he doesn't win it this year, because as we spoke earlier, this will probably be his last chance.
Chuck?
You know, it's interesting. I think Dusty is one of those guys that kind of flies under the radar. I think the people who love baseball, who know baseball, give Dusty his due. But so if he wins or doesn't win, I still think he's a Hall of Famer, great manager, and I don't think it would hurt his situation. It would help it, but I don't think it would hurt it.
I think Chuck's on point. Right now, he's the manager with the most wins who has not won a World Series. If he loses, he'll still be the manager with the most wins who's not won a World Series. However, if he wins, I think, like Chuck said, it'll probably help him a little bit, or people at least, give him his due. He'll get his due.
All right, I tell you what we're finding out, at least among us, the real fellas, Dusty's not going to lose much luster. But let's talk about Dusty Baker, the man. Because what I see of Dusty Baker, you remember the first time he was in the World Series as a manager, and his little boy was always running out to the mound, and the one time the boy had to be rescued to get out of the way, and that boy is a man now. You just had a nice feeling about Dusty Baker. There's just something about the guy, the man himself, that he seems like a pure person. Let me start.
Was that the Giants? Was he coaching the Giants?
That was the Giants.
Yeah.
That was the Giants. Larry, let me start with you on that. What kind of a man do you see as in Dusty Baker?
I'm not sure I really have that much of an opinion of him as a man. I just look at him as a baseballer. He seems to be a decent manager. He seems to handle people well from that aspect. So I just look at him as a decent manager, a good manager. Even when he was here with the Nationals, I thought he had bad luck and got fired.
Earl.
I'm more of a front runner, David, as you know. He's never won anything, so I've never really paid that much attention to him. So I'm going to take what Larry said. I don't know that much about him as a man because I haven't even followed him. So I don't know.
Okay. Chuck?
Well, he's been in that sport for over 52, 53 years. And no one anywhere ever says anything bad about the guy. And they threw him in the middle of that Astros situation when they were cheating and so forth. They cleaned that thing up. They haven't really missed a beat. And kudos to Dusty to hold that, to be able to hold that whole thing together.
When you look at Dusty Baker, you're looking at a guy who's had a tremendous career, but he was mentored early on in his career by Hank Aaron when Dusty came up into the majors and he was with the Braves. And he got a chance to see up close what real pressure was like, particularly when Hank Aaron was pursuing the home run record of Babe Ruth, and how Hank Aaron handled those circumstances. So Dusty Baker has been through a lot. And as you mentioned, Chuck, over a 50-year full career as a player and as a manager. Let me tell you who's going to win this series. I really like Dusty Baker. I want the Astros to win, but I just got a feeling it just looks like the Phillies are dialed in to win this thing. They just look like that. Do you guys agree with that?
I agree with you wholeheartedly.
I think the Astros blew the first game. I don't know how many games you can afford to lose. I mean, they had a 5-0 lead and couldn't hold on to it. And the Phillies, they remind me of the Nationals in 2019. They underdogs and just don't give up. So. Mm-hmm. Just the same Houston team. So
They were up 5-0 with Verlander on the mound, and they just fell apart. Houston hits that long ball. So that's the thing about baseball for the real fellas who've been watching baseball for years. Baseball is really different now. They play for the long ball. There's no stealing of bases per se. Nobody's really hitting for singles.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the game is different. You know what I'm saying? Like speed. I don't know. It's a different game. It's just like it's almost like softball. Everybody's trying to knock that thing out the park and get good
three-point shot in basketball.
Right, the 3-point shot. Well, look, and the pitchers go 5 innings and they bring in the bullpen. No matter how great the pitcher is doing, it's just really different. Baseball is today.
It is a different game. But let me say this: the guy that kind of reminds me of the past, who's been a star in this playoff and now the World Series, Bryce Harper. We all have kind of a Washington, D.C. connection. You guys are born and raised in D.C. I spent a third of my life in D.C. And Bryce Harper was tagged to be a superstar from the moment he came out of high school. And he's done it. I don't know how many home runs he has so far in the postseason, 6 or 7. But he looks like the man, and he looks like he is ready for the moment. Would you guys agree with that?
Oh, he definitely played well.
He has. He's hot. But here's the thing: you talk about a throwback and all that stuff, and I agree. But does he play the field? Does Bryce Harper play?
So far, he's been playing. He's been the designated hitter.
He got hurt during the season. He normally plays the field. He had an injury during the season and
He's got a thumb injury, I believe.
Yeah, so he can only. Fortunately for him, they changed the rule in the National League this year because he wouldn't even been able to bat. They didn't have designated hitter up until this year.
Mm-hmm.
So he's came back in mid-season and started batting.
He's definitely showed up in the playoffs. I can tell you that.
Yeah, he stepped up. I'm surprised. I'm not shocked, but I'm surprised. But yeah, he's doing well.
Go ahead, Earl. I didn't mean to step on.
He's doing. I mean, but seems like everyone who's ever played for the Nationals goes to another team and plays better. But that's a whole other story. So go ahead. Let me get back to you. We got a lot to discuss.
Is he doing something that Aaron Judge should have been doing for the Yankees? I mean, in other words, hitting when it mattered. I think so.
Well, sure. I mean, but other superstars have gone through that.
Hey, the Yankees wouldn't even have been in the playoff if it wasn't for Judge, and to me, that gives him a vibe with me. So they wouldn't even be there if it wasn't for him. So what can they do?
That's a
J-Lo,
fair point.
who was the Yankee that played third base and was with Texas? Was married to J-Lo.
Rodriguez.
Alex Rodriguez.
A-Rod used to struggle in the playoffs too.
Oh, Dave Winfield too. Dave Winfield.
Real quickly, before we sign off of baseball, as much as we talk about the lack of African-American players in baseball, there is color in baseball, particularly when you look at the announced team and the host, David Ortiz, Big Papi, A-Rod, and Frank Thomas. That's an impressive lineup and very multicultural.
It is.
So, baseball in that regard, at least Fox Sports.
You know what else they said too, David? There was an article recently that said this is the first time in a World Series since 1950 that a Black American player is not in the starting lineup. The first time
one of the
two teams
yeah.
since 1950.
Well, real quickly, and I know we got a lot to discuss. But that said, is it important that American Black players become more visible in Major League Baseball? But the fact is, there are a lot of Black players still in baseball. They just happen to be Latin Black players.
Right.
All right. That said, we are going to talk about the biggest sport in America, the National Football League. Major trades this week. Bradley Chubb coming from the Broncos to Miami, probably the biggest trade. Roquan Smith to the Ravens. 2 linebackers going to teams that look like they're really going to be fighting for something. Let me start with you, Earl. What do you see in the NFL with the trade? Because normally we don't really look at the NFL and the trade deadline like we have this season. Earl, your thoughts?
I thought that both were major acquisitions for the teams. It seemed like both teams sending the message, especially Miami, that hey, we have a good team and we're trying to win this game, but we also realize that we have to have talent on this team. And they went out and got Chubb. I think it's going to make a difference, and I'm actually looking at them a little different with that acquisition. I still don't think they're going to win it all, but I look at them different with that acquisition.
Larry.
I tend to agree with Earl. It's funny, I was watching ESPN today, and some of the experts, some of the former pro players were saying that Kansas City, Buffalo, and Baltimore were all better than Miami, so Miami needed to make their move. Then I kind of thought about it. I think Miami beat Buffalo and Baltimore already this year before Tua got hurt. And by adding this guy, I think it's going to be like one of the missing links.
Chuck.
Well, I like it too. I think what the NFL has recognized is that they saw Cincinnati and the Rams last year. I think the Cincinnati team was what, a 6th seed or a 7th seed or something, and the Rams, they weren't a top seed. They added Von Miller, and both of them ended up in the Super Bowl, and the Rams won. And it was so. I think this acquisition of the linebacker in Miami, and especially Roquan in the Ravens, which was my favorite move. I think those teams they think they got a shot to win it all. I really do.
Speaking, and I'll let you finish. Start with this. Who are the best teams? On paper, it looks like it's Buffalo and the Eagles, and then everybody else. Would you agree with that, Chuck?
I agree. I would add Kansas City in there too. I would put Kansas City. I think those 3 are the 3 best teams in football, and then there's the next tier.
Larry.
I tend to think Buffalo and Kansas City are. Philadelphia seems to be playing well, but I'm not sure they're that much better than, say, Dallas. They beat Dallas when their quarterback was out, and I think Dallas has a pretty decent team.
Earl, you a Cowboys fan?
I'm not a Cowboys fan, but I think that Philadelphia and Buffalo are the 2 best teams currently in the NFL, in my opinion.
All right, we're going to do a little bit of a wager here, percentage-wise. The percentage chance, Earl, you are a gambling expert. Percentage chance that we're going to see Buffalo against Philly in the Super Bowl. What's the chance? Earl, start with you.
I would say 50-50.
Okay. Chuck?
I agree. By the way, I've been saying those 2 teams since week 1.
Larry?
So 50-50 implies that we think that at least one of them will lose, right? if that's what that means, I think one of them, I'll go with 50-50 too.
All right.
Definitely not 100%.
It always comes down, the National Football League, it always comes down to injuries. I mean, look how bad the Bengals looked once they lost that guy, Jamar Chase, this past weekend against the Browns. I think injuries just play so much.
They've been kind of mediocre all year, though.
They
started to score, though, Larry, when they were starting to click.
All right. Now, we've talked about the top teams. And I think both of, all of us agree that the Eagles and Buffalo are in the discussion for 2 of the best teams, whether they end up in the Super Bowl or not. But seeing that Buffalo and the Eagles are 2 of the top teams, do they have 2 of the MVP players on their teams? It is Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts, the two top candidates for MVP. Larry.
Oh, I'll say at this point they have to be, but I mean that could change in a couple of weeks. Mahomes could be right there because what Kansas City's like lost 2 games. I think they'd be right there if Buffalo slips again.
Mm-hmm. Chuck.
I think those are the two, along with Mahomes as well. And they added a receiver in the trade deadline too from the Giants, I think. But yeah, they added another weapon to that offense as well.
Who?
The Kansas City.
Oh, they did. Okay.
They added a wide receiver.
They got the guy from New York that was hurt or something or wasn't playing. That was supposed to be
Right.
supposed to be the number 1 receiver.
Right.
Okay, guys, bear me. I've been paying attention for all the whole night, but what was the question again?
MVP.
The
those two.
MVP. Does it look like it's Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts at the top of the list?
Yes.
And you guys, of course, I had to say quarterbacks, and I hate that.
Right.
But it is what it is.
Right. David, who would you say the top 2 or 3 MVP candidates are so far?
Well,
I know you don't like all these people.
I would agree with you guys.
Right.
Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts. And if it wasn't a quarterback's award, I'm thinking the big man from Tennessee is showing that he's the best running back in the league. And he may be the best football player in football. And I wish that was the award, the best football player. You know how I feel about that.
Well, that linebacker down in Dallas is doing a hell of a job too.
Well, he should be one of the best. He's one of the best football players too.
Haven't he been injured?
Micah?
Uh-huh.
He's been playing hurt, but he still seems to make a big play every game. He's had a groin injury the last 2 or 3 weeks.
This year, he's probably in the top 2 or 3 best players. Of course, unfortunately, he's not going to get key votes for MVP. He'll get token votes for MVP. Let me ask you something, guys. This is about backup quarterbacks. Backup quarterbacks are really, really important. And I'm going to ask you guys about P.J. Walker. Now right here in Indianapolis, we got a big quarterback controversy. We just fired the offensive coordinator with the Colts. P.J. Walker spent a couple of years on the backup squad for the Colts. Colts kicked him around, and he never really got to play. But look at him now. He had one of the great passes for touchdown that we've seen all season. How important is the backup quarterback to a team's hopes for not only playoff success, but maybe Super Bowl success? Chuck.
I think it's important. I do. I think you should have a quality veteran backup. Look at the Saints right now. The guy with the red hair, Dalton, he's doing a pretty good job for the Saints, and I think he started out maybe 3rd string this year.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think a good backup. And I remember the year that Philadelphia won the Super Bowl, I think Foles came in and won a couple of games.
Yes, he did. He won the Super Bowl directly for them.
And we as Washingtonians, we know that wasn't Doug a backup to
he was
Ripley?
Backup. He was backup.
He wasn't really a backup.
Not to Ripley.
Jay Schrader was
Jay Schrader.
Jay Schrader. That's what it was. Jay
Schrader.
Jay Schrader was the backup.
I know.
But sometimes if you have a good backup, you can go far. Now, moving away from backup quarterbacks to a guy that people want to see as a backup, Tua Tagovailoa. He's looking pretty darn good, and Miami is responding to him. Are you guys worried though that he might get hurt again? And let me start with you, Larry.
Well, I mean, I guess he looks all right. You made some statement that people want to see him as a backup. Who is that?
Tua has been criticized for his entire NFL career. I mean, the 3 years that he's been in, he doesn't have the arm strength. He's this, he's that. He doesn't read the formations well. There's been some kind of criticism of Tua Tagovailoa since he came out of Alabama.
And then last year they got him Waddle, and this year they got him Hill, and all of a sudden he can play. They got. I mean, once he gets some people to work with, he gets to play well.
That makes a difference, doesn't it?
Yeah, he's.
Same
So
with Hurts.
do I worry about him getting hurt? Yeah, naturally, but he seems to be okay. He said they were thinking about the Super Bowl, so that's my man. He said that today.
Earl,
Yes,
are you worried about Tua, and are you happy for him?
I'm happy for Tua. He's as you said, he's been under a lot of criticism. Maybe some unnecessary, maybe some necessary, but I'm worried about any quarterback because it seems like there are a lot of offensive lines who are horrible out there. But whether they had a good offensive line or not, as Larry said, I'm naturally worried about him. It's a tough game. He's not a big quarterback. But am I worried about the concussion? I mean, I don't know. I don't know anything about those. I can't comment as far as that. But physically, as far as him getting hurt, yeah, I'm worried about him. He's a small dude. It's a tough game.
Chuck,
So, I saw a stat that said him and Hurt both this year, if they started and finished the game, they're undefeated. And both of them have been criticized as maybe they're not, NFL quarterbacks, and both of them are having fantastic years. And I think back to what Larry was saying, they put some weapons along with those guys, and all of a sudden they look pretty doggone good. In terms of worried about quarterbacks getting hurt, I'm really more worried about Burrow. It seems to me that every time I watch a game, they are beating the crap out of Burrow, and I don't know how he gets up every time and gets under that center again, because I'm telling you, it's unbelievable what they do to him.
speaking of Joe Burrow, how much is he hurt by the loss of Jamar Chase, his standout wide receiver? How much is he hurt by Chase being out?
Big.
He's hurt a lot. He hurt a lot by it. I mean, it's not as bad as if he's hurt by his raggedy offensive line.
Oh my God!
But he's hurt by Chase. He can't get the ball away as quickly. He's not as familiar with whoever's going to replace his position. His offensive line is horrible, so he needs to be able to get rid of that ball as quickly as possible. And he's a game breaker. Anytime you lose a game breaker, you're going to be hurt.
Okay. Larry, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's too soon to tell. I think a lot of people are putting a lot of emphasis on that one game, but I thought the biggest problem was he didn't have time to pass. And they were slow to make adjustments. They made adjustments late in the second half, and all of a sudden, T. Higgins caught a touchdown, Boyd caught a touchdown, but he just didn't have time. I mean, Cleveland looked like they knew when the ball was snapped, and they was beating everybody else to the quarterback.
Horrible.
All right, before we leave the NFL, all four of us, have a Washington, D.C. connection. I've spent a third of my life in Washington, D.C., the greater Washington, D.C. area, more than 25 years. Larry, Chuck, and Earl, all natives of Washington, D.C. And the team that everybody always focused on, at least when I first moved to D.C., were the Washington Redskins, now the Washington Commanders. And their owner, Dan Snyder, apparently is beginning the process of possibly selling the team, a team he bought in 1999 for $800 million. And apparently that the Commanders are worth $5 billion.
I heard they could get
5.6.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let me just ask the question, and I'm going to start with Earl. Earl, you are the biggest DC football critic there is. Do you want to see Dan Snyder finally sell this team, particularly with all the mess that he's created with that franchise?
Frankly, I could care less, but I would like for him to be relieved of those duties because I do love the NFL as as the majority of people in this country do. And I believe if he's moved away from the game, that will help the NFL game for sure. So I guess I do care. He needs to go. I want him
Larry.
Yeah, I think he's never really been. He never knew how to operate that business. He would never hire football people like general managers to do jobs. I think at least he would spend money, which I can't say about the baseball team, but I think he needed to. If he was any other type of business where he had to produce a product to be successful, it would have never worked. So, as a Washingtonian who wants to root for the local team, I'll be happy to see him go.
Chuck.
Yeah, I was happy. Yeah, he's got it. Yeah. I think everybody in town, Republican, Democrat, Independent, rich, poor, black and white, we would all band behind, have a parade if they got rid of that guy, and there would not be any counter parades that would go on across the street. It's that bad.
But for all, I agree. I'd like to cheer for the Washington football team, the Washington Commanders. I would like to. I can't. I can't even cheer for my hometown team, the Colts. But that said, I feel uncomfortable rewarding a guy, even though we want him to sell the team. I think it's unanimous among the four of us. We all want Dan Snyder to sell the team. But I'm uncomfortable with the fact that he could make, as a profit, more than $4 billion. So being a bad boy, doing stupid, almost unconscionable things, he gets rewarded with a $4 billion profit. I got a problem with that. I don't know how
America.
You guys feel, but I got a problem.
Welcome to capitalism in America.
So the other thing you could do is let him hold it on for 10 more years and
be worth
be
three
like
times as much.
$7 billion, $8 billion.
Right. They did that to Sterling too. They paid Sterling off, the guy who owned the Clippers. They paid him a big number too.
The new owner paid that amount of money. He overpaid for them.
Big time. I know.
But this is what Forbes is saying is $5.6 billion.
Unbelievable.
It is
unbelievable.
Before we leave the
Go ahead,
NFL,
Earl.
before we leave the NFL, I'd like to seriously, and I know I'm always bashing teams and people, but in you guys' opinion, who has the worst offensive line in the league between the Commanders, the Bengals, and the Buccaneers?
It's an excellent question, but I live in Indianapolis. The Colts have the worst offensive line.
Wow.
If it's worse than that Bengals line.
Bengals look the worst to me.
It's the worst. It's the worst. Trust me. It's
Wow.
the highest paid. It's the highest paid offensive line in the NFL, and they could not. They already got a guy heading toward retirement.
You just want Chuck over now with that little tidbit there. First he didn't care. Now he looks at it differently.
But before, hey, look, real quick before we leave football, I saw a stat this weekend that I still can't get over. So listen to this: a quarterback in the National Football League on Sunday, and he won, was 6 for 10, 55 yards, 1 interception. Let me repeat: he was 6 for 10. 55 yards, 1 interception, no touchdowns, and they won.
How many yards did Henry get? Did his running back
There you go.
His running back had 200 and something.
He had 220 yards rushing.
And let me just say, just so that we understand who that is.
Malik Willis.
That's Malik Willis from Liberty University.
He's an intelligent quarterback. He had something that was working, and he kept feeding him, giving him the ball.
Can you believe that?
If you got a big hoss to hand it to, that's who you hand it to.
Is that as bad as when Buffalo ran over somebody earlier this year?
No, but it's still a beatdown.
Henry is a horse. He had 220. He's a horse. 32 carries, 220 yards. He looked like Jim Brown.
And I think he set, or at least tied, an NFL record for the most number of games over 200 yards in a single game.
That's his fourth straight game over 100 yards rushing.
Yeah, since week 3, he's been busting.
And by the way, that team is now 5-2. Remember, we thought the Titans were struggling, and now they're 5-2.
They're still going to win the division. Look who's in the division.
It's a bad division.
It's the Texans and it's the Jaguars. Sorry. It's an easy division to win. Trust me. All right, we're going to move on. We'll get back to some other football, college football, to wrap up the show. But we got to talk about the NBA. And the lead story of the NBA this week was not the games, but it was off the court. The Nets finally, they decided that Steve Nash was not head coach material. Do you guys agree he should have been fired, or was it a witch hunt, to lack of a better term? Larry, you're our NBA expert.
It seemed awfully early to fire him to me. Things aren't working there. They're a dysfunctional unit. I don't think that he's really necessarily the problem. They have some players that are problems there. But he couldn't control them. I guess the general manager says it's got to be him or me, so I'm getting ready to coach. It just seems a little early to me after, 5 or 6 games. That seemed to be a quick trigger.
Kevin Durant, the general manager of the Nets, called for his ouster this summer.
And they could have done it then.
Well, Kevin Durant, as the manager of the general manager of that team, just decided he'd wait for 6 games to do it. I'm just joking. Earl, your thoughts about Steve Nash? Should he have been fired?
To answer your question, yes, he should have been fired. And Larry thinks it's a little bit early.
Or late, okay.
That's what I want to do. He should have been fired. I mean, obviously no one on our team had that much respect for him.
I would agree with that. That. Chuck.
The supposed stars or assumed leaders, they don't really have any leaders on their team, didn't have respect for him. So, it's just an ugly situation. So
I think 2 things are at play. First, some people would argue, I think Steve is a nice guy, like a really nice guy, whatever. But some people would say he shouldn't even got the job in the first place. I mean, he had no experience. He had no experience, etc. Well, and so that's one thing. And the second thing, I think the reason it happened faster, Larry, is because Udoka is available. And for them to get that guy and replace with his connections with the Nets, his connections with Simmons, I think they thought, hey, this is a good time to make this move.
But don't you think Udoka would have been available for a while?
Well, no, I don't know. I don't know.
Let me just say this. I think Steve Nash was in trouble the moment they rolled the balls out for the preseason. He was dead man walking the moment Kevin Durant said he got to go. You're dealing with Kyrie. That is such a dysfunctional franchise, Kyrie Irving. And by the way, Kyrie Irving doubling down on his anti-Semitic support. It's ridiculous. It's just absolutely ridiculous. And it's always something with Kyrie Irving. So I wish Udoka all the luck in the world, because he's going to need it.
How many points did he have last night, Larry?
Yeah, 4. Yeah. But let me comment on that. I just saw an alert that he acknowledged the negative impact of his post, but he still didn't apologize for it. Speaking about Kyrie Irving.
Of course.
That team, the real problem there, and I don't know whether Nash is a good coach or not. Management there they've let the inmates run the asylum. I mean, first of all, Kyrie Irving started off saying, well, maybe the 3 of us can coach me, Kevin. Saying stuff like that. Then you got Durant saying the coach or the GM has to leave, or I'm going to leave. They're letting the inmates run the asylum, and those guys have been there 4 years now. The other thing, those two should be leaders now. Because if Durant won't speak up, I don't think any of the younger guys. I guess Kyrie's around 30 now. I think Durant has got to be the one to speak up, and I don't think that's in his nature. You know,
they're not leaders.
Yeah,
neither
and it's just dysfunctional. And the ownership there, they need to take their team back. And who knows when Kyrie Irving's going to take off again? I mean, he hasn't exactly played a full season anytime soon.
And they have the worst defense in the NFL, in the NBA. Their defense is absolutely horrible.
And here's the other thing: they have the lowest season ticket rate in the league.
Exactly.
That's incredible.
Is that Earl?
They haven't changed in my house.
That's a fine. We got to fine you for that, Earl. Anyway, I'm just.
I really believe that if anybody, maybe I'm giving them too much credit, but I think that is a heck of a pick. If it works out and Udoka becomes the coach of that team, wow, how sweet that is for them to pull off a guy like that, given his history with that team, his history with some of those players. You know, maybe he could get through to him.
It's all going to depend on if management supports him. I didn't see that with Nash at all.
Right.
But Udoka, keep in mind, comes in with a shadow in his hiring. So keep that in mind. Because for some people, you know, they're not going to forgive him for whatever happened in his extramarital, extra relationship when he was in Boston.
Well, I don't think anyone on this panel cares what he does in his private life.
At least three of us don't.
I know. At least three of us don't. Yeah.
I'm going to let you guys
and
keep
we're a lot
talking.
closer to New York than you are.
I'm going to let you guys keep talking. Anyway, because I'm going to let that go. Real quickly, the best player, before we move on to college football, the best player in the NBA right now, right as we speak, right now is who, Earl?
Luka Doncic.
Wow. Listen to my little buddy Earl.
Okay, Chuck, best player in the NBA right now.
Giannis.
Okay. Larry, best player in the NBA right now.
The same player who's been the best player for the last 3 years, Giannis.
Oh, I thought you were going to say LeBron James. Not the last 3 years. Not the last 3 years, or I mean,
last 3 years.
No. Not when the
Yes.
Not no.
All right. Let me resolve this.
Not when the Lakers won the title.
Let me resolve this. Maybe I didn't ask the question correctly.
Lost the first round.
The best player right now, as we speak, is Luka Doncic.
Wow.
The best player in the world, period, is the Greek freak, Giannis Antetokounmpo. And guess what? The best 4 players in the world are not from America. All right, that said, top 5 football teams.
Hey, Charles, I would kindly ask you not to follow up any post when I post on social media about Michael Jordan, that you don't add anything about LeBron, because they don't have anything to do with each other, and I don't appreciate it. Okay, sorry, David.
All right. That commercial interruption from Earl, and it was spot on, Earl. Thank you for doing that. Sometimes we got to haze.
Well, don't put up a post that's meaningless. So what all
right, let's move on.
Please.
Top 5 college football teams. The first in the playoff rankings: Tennessee, Ohio State, Georgia, Clemson, and Michigan. With Alabama at 6 and TCU at 7. Do we agree with that list? And let me start with you, Chuck.
I agree with it. Today. There's going to be some games played. Like one is a big one this weekend between Tennessee and Georgia. And Ohio State still has to play Michigan, and the SEC has to have its tournament, et cetera. So there's some games to be played, but right now, yeah, I agree with that list.
All right. Larry.
I'll go with it. I don't like voting things like this, so I don't. I will say you might ask this question later, so I'll back off one team that you did mention, but I think is probably underrated, which is TCU. Now, how much underrated, I'm not sure.
Well, we will see. Let me ask you, Earl. Tennessee, Ohio State, Georgia, Clemson, and Michigan right now are the top 5 teams in the future playoff list. Do you agree?
I'm not too sure about Clemson being in that top 4. For what I've seen, I'm not too sure about them.
Mm-hmm.
And we're just talking about the top 4, right? Or we talking about the whole list?
I mentioned the top 5 teams that have come out: Tennessee, Ohio State, Georgia, Clemson, and Michigan in that order.
I got a problem with Clemson being there, and I might have a problem with Michigan being in there, but that's just what I think.
I got a problem with Michigan too. I'm not sold on them.
I like Michigan this year. I like Michigan, and I think the way it should shake out, the 2 big powerhouses of college football, the Big Ten and the SEC, will have 2 teams each in the Final Four. That's my prediction.
I think there'll be 3 SEC teams and Ohio
They'll never let that happen. It will not happen. It will not happen. It will not happen.
If Alabama, Georgia, and Tennessee
have 3 SEC teams.
Okay.
That would be the death of college football. They're not going to do that.
Please, David. Please.
No, that committee understands that there's a long-range growth of college football in the making. You cannot have 3 SEC teams in the finals, even if they are the 3 best teams. You can't have it. Can't have it. It won't be right. I don't think it's going to happen.
Well, Chuck said, you heard what Chuck.
It's not even right to have 2.
Today is November 2nd. You heard what Chuck said. We'll see what happens.
It's not even right to have 2, but that won't preclude them from having 3. Make a decision out of who's the best out of the SEC and let them roll.
All right. Another college football prediction. Is there a non-Power 5 school this year that could make the playoffs like Cincinnati did last year? A non-Power 5 school.
Let me go first.
Go ahead. That's
why I mentioned TCU. I think they'll need a lot of luck.
But they are a Power 5 school.
They're Power 5? Their conference,
the Big 12.
I guess I never think about their conference.
Right, me neither.
Okay, I'll back off. They're not traditional school that I think if they can remain undefeated and a couple of those other teams, I think a couple of those teams might have 2 losses, and that might knock them out of there, but they'll need a lot of help.
Yeah. So right now, I don't see another non-Power 5 school this year that's in a position to make the playoff roster. I don't see that team. Earl, do you see one?
No, I don't see one. I definitely don't.
I don't see one. I don't see one either, but I understand what Larry is saying because I think TCU is like Cincinnati was last year. Really, I do. I don't think that conference is any much better or worse than the conference that Cincinnati and Houston and all those guys are in. Well, even though it is a Power 5, even though on record it is a Power 5, I get what you're saying. But, Cincinnati went into Notre Dame and beat them last year and et cetera. So I think Cincinnati was a pretty good ball club last year.
Now, before we bash the Big 12 unnecessarily, let me just throw out a couple of facts about the Big 12.
Okay.
The Big 12 in the last 5 or 6 years have had more Heisman Trophy winners, right? University of Oklahoma University.
Yep.
Remember, Patrick Mahomes came out of the Big 12.
Yeah.
So Big 12 is not, chicken feed.
Agreed.
But their teams haven't been in the championship
And that's why I'm looking forward to the 12-team playoffs that are coming up in a couple of years, if not next season. And we'll do that. Real quickly, do you have a Heisman Trophy leader before we sign off? Let me start with Chuck.
Herndon Hooker. If Hooker, right now, if I was voting, I would vote for him for the Heisman Trophy. However, if he beats Georgia this weekend, I'd give it to him. I'd just ship it to his house. And if he doesn't win, and then if he doesn't win, I think Stroud and Young will be in the mix.
All right. Hendon Hooker for you, Larry.
I don't have a call right now.
All right. What about you, Earl?
I don't have a call on these guys either.
All right. Let me just give you my call. There's only two guys that are in the Heisman list, and like the MVP for the NFL, like the Heisman Trophy in college football, it's going to be a quarterback. Hendon Hooker, the 24, almost 25-year-old quarterback for Tennessee, is going to win the Heisman Trophy, edging out C.J. Stroud of the Ohio State Buckeyes. That's that. Okay, we have any closing thoughts before we leave the show? Let me start with you, Earl. You got a closing thought?
No, I don't.
Chuck.
You know what? I don't have any closing thoughts, or I don't have a closing thought.
And Larry.
Well, I just like to state that while there's a dearth of lack of Black American baseball players in the 2022 draft, 4 out of the top 5 drafts number 2, 3, 4, and 5 were African American. So maybe, and they were all a part of the Major League's RBI program. So maybe we are making a comeback.
All right. Well, good luck on that case. I do have a closing thought, and my closing thought is about HBCU football, Jackson State, and Deion Sanders. And HBCU football has been overlooked. Jackson State has been overlooked. Keep in mind, arguably one of the greatest players of all time in football, Walter Payton, came from Jackson State. Why can't we one day see a Jackson State University play big-time football against the Alabamas, the Clemsons, and the Tennessees? Why not? Why not think it's possible? It should be possible. Keeping in mind what the budgets are. The annual budget for Clemson for football is $55 million. The annual budget for Notre Dame is $97 million. The annual budget for the University of Texas, which is #1 budget in college football, even though they don't win everything these days, $163 million is their football budget. But my school, for instance, which is not a Power 5 school, Ball State University, we're not a Power 5 school, but we are a major college football program. Our budget at Ball State is $9 million. $9 million. That's it. It's no more than that. So why can't Jackson State? I say let's start a GoFundMe for Jackson State and make them big enough that they can have an annual budget of about $30 or $40 million and kick some Alabama Crimson Tide ass every year. That's what I'd like to see. That's our show for tonight. We will see you again next week when Real Fellas Talk Sports once again. Good night, everybody.
Good job, David.